Okay, and we are back yet again. We are live here on the Hoplite channel. I'm your host, Hop, and you clicked on this video to see Samurai Literature, Yamamoto Tsunetomo, Part 1. And I appreciate everyone coming back for our continuing Samurai Literature series, which is gonna, after it's all over, it's going to look pretty long. It'll be quite extensive, quite voluminous. But I'd say we're about halfway point now with Yamamoto Tsunetomo. And this is part 1, and we are going to go over parts of his life in these sections, as well as readings from his work, Hagakure. We left off the last series with Issai Chozanshi and his book, The Demon Sermon on the Martial Arts. We left that series, as I said, the triangle was the third part of the series of, you could say, the Zen Buddhist influence on Bushido from the works of Takuan Soho, Yagyu Munenori, and Issai Chozanshi. Those three men probably left more of their work in the Zen Buddhist realm of Bushido. But you'll see with Tsunetomo, we now move with the more militaristic, no-nonsense, full metal jacket, drill sergeant style of Bushido, as in, people are soft these days. Back in my day, we used to cut off people's heads, and it was, no big deal. It was a daily occurrence, and it put some sand in your spirit. So this is the more militaristic, Shintoist style of Bushido, and we'll see with Tsunetomo, he was probably the most well-known source for that style of Bushido that moved away from the Zen Buddhism questioning of truth, the mind of no mind, the philosophical questions a Bushi would have in his way as a samurai, and how he would approach Bushido with a Buddhist mind seeking enlightenment. This was quite foreign to the Tsunetomo school of thought, and it's a good change of pace. It definitely gives you two different looks at Bushido and how different samurai may have treated the practice. So before we get to the work itself, let's talk a little about the author. So as I said, we have Yamamoto Tsunetomo. We know he was born on June 11th in 1659 AD, and he died November 30th, 1719 AD. So this would put him, again, as with Issai Chozanshi, around the same era. They were contemporaries, Tsunetomo and Chozanshi, and they were born both about a decade, give or take, after Takuan Soho and Yagyu Munenori passed away. So you could say these would have been the grandchildren of the Yagyu Munenori, Takuan Soho generation of samurai and Bushido scholars. But we know that Tsunetomo was a samurai of the Saga domain in the Hizen province, and that he served under a Lord Nabeshima Mitsushige. And I'll get more into the samurai life of Tsunetomo. But what we know about this lord was that Tsunetomo was very loyal to him. And when Nabeshima died in 1700 AD, there was almost a presumption that the samurai that were left without this leader would commit seppuku as a way of joining their lord in the afterlife. But before Nabeshima died, he forbid this practice. He was of the mind that it was not in keeping with Bushido and the samurai spirit, the religion of honor, to needlessly throw away your life with ritual killing. So Yamamoto Tsunetomo, without a master, decided to become a hermit, and I believe he took up a life as a monk after his lord died, and he composed his work, the Hagakure, while he was in this hermitage. And Hagakure simply means hidden by the leaves. That's the translation from the Japanese. And he dictated these teachings to another scribe who composed them into the Hagakure, and this work was published in 1716. So about 3 years prior to his death. And it was very popular in Japan. The Hagakure had a large following with people who studied Bushido and were interested in the martial arts. But it didn't really break through into Western pop culture until much later, probably not until the 20th century. But in any event, we'll read now from the Hagakure and talk about some passages that Tsunetomo wrote down or had his scribe write down for him for posterity. Okay. And these chapters are in no particular order. They just kind of flow. They don't really have any structure other than lessons. And we begin with the very beginning. This is page 3 in chapter 1. Tsunetomo said, "The way of the samurai is found in death. We all want to live, and in large part we make our logic according to what we like. But not having attained our aim and continuing to live is cowardice. This is a thin, dangerous line. To die without gaining one's aim is a dog's death and fanaticism. But there is no shame in this. This is the substance of the way of the samurai. If by setting one's heart right every morning and evening, one is able to live as though his body were already dead, he gains freedom in the way. His whole life will be without blame, and he will succeed in his calling." So this theme of death and life in Tsunetomo's work, the Hagakure, is ever present. And we will see in the latter section of the samurai literature series, Miyamoto Musashi says the exact same thing, that to be a great warrior, you must proceed into battle and conflict with the presumption that you are already dead, that you are not going into this battle to save your life. You are going into battle as a ghost. Your opponent is a ghost. There is no meaning to this battle other than your skill, your victory, surpassing your opponent's skill and squelching your opponent's chance at victory. But there is no preservation of life on the line. That is the mind you must have, because if you cling to that and your only aim is to preserve this life, however good or bad it may be, this is not in keeping with the way. The way of the samurai is found in death. And he says this acceptance beyond just wanting to live, but in setting your samurai craft, your Bushido, on an aim, on a goal of attaining something, that is in keeping with the way. But this notion that you can simply be a proper samurai and execute Bushido faithfully to the virtues for the simple goal of preserving your own life is fanaticism. It's pretty strict to say is that your life is meaningless if there is no aim. You will die a dog's death if your only aim is to keep yourself alive. Yeah, again, not very Zen Buddhist, but it did not mince words. Okay, we'll move on to the next reading. And this is on page 12. And Tsunetomo said, "There is one transcending level, and this is the most excellent of all. This person is aware of the endlessness of entering deeply into a certain way and never thinks of himself as having finished. He truly knows his own insufficiencies and never in his whole life thinks that he has succeeded. It is said that Master Yagyu once remarked, 'I do not know the way to defeat others, but the way to defeat myself.' Throughout your life, advance daily, becoming more skillful than yesterday, more skillful than today. This is never ending. Among one's affairs, there should not be more than 2 or 3 matters of what one could call great concern. If these are deliberated upon during ordinary times, they can be understood. Thinking about things previously and then handling them lightly when the time comes is what this is all about." Okay, so what's he saying here? Well, Tsunetomo mentions, as I said earlier, the samurai grandfather era, which would have been Yagi Munenori and Tako and Soho. He mentions Master Yagyu in that, I do not know how to defeat my enemy, I only know how to defeat myself. And this is in keeping with the constant perpetuation of learning, of improving technique, of increasing your self-awareness in the realm of the Bushi and walking the samurai's path of Bushido. You can never think as though you've attained this level of mastery that this is where you can rest, find this abiding place. He that does not believe he has ever achieved a level of success worth stopping at is one who will constantly achieve new success each day he practices. And that to think upon these things after the fact is in keeping with the way, and handling them lightly as you approach new circumstances is also in keeping with this way. Never letting yourself dwell on what you could have done better or what you should do, but learning about what you have done right and what you have done wrong after the fact, and then approaching life as each day is a new day, and improving your skills and not dwelling on, am I going to do this right? Will I get better today? Will I do worse today? Dispense with these notions, move forward, give your life an aim, and walk the path of the Bushi by seeing each day as a new chance to become a better master than the samurai you were the day before. Okay, makes sense. We'll go to the next reading, and this is on page 18. He says, whether speaking formally or informally, one should look his listener in the eye. A polite greeting is done at the beginning and finished. Speaking with downcast eyes is carelessness. It is carelessness to go about with one's hands inside the slits in the sides of his hakama. Even if you are aware that you may be struck down today and are firmly resolved to an inevitable death, if you are slain with an unseemly appearance, you will show your lack of previous resolve, will be despised by your enemy, and will appear unclean. For this reason, it is said that both old and young should take care of their appearance. Okay, so this is a little bit more mundane to speak of a samurai's appearance and how he should address people. But if you are a master of your craft, and if you are looking to maintain your life as a samurai within the 8 virtues of Bushido, speak as though you are that samurai with those virtues at your beck and call. Look someone in the eye when you speak with them. Make sure that they look you in the eye when they speak to you. To look down on the floor and put your hands in your pockets demonstrates this carelessness, that you don't take this conversation seriously, or you don't believe that you have the right to speak to this person. So if you show this outward expression of interest with eye contact, and eye contact being given back to you, this will demonstrate an attention to care. And so too, he says that if you are a samurai keeping with the way, you should care about your appearance. They say, clothes make the man. And the samurai thought no differently, that if you took attention and you shined your armor, and if you sharpened your sword, and if you made sure your helmet was on straight, and your gauntlets were on properly, and that your clothes were tidy and your face clean shaven, well then people would say that this person, if they take attention to make sure the little matters are seen to, then of course they will take attention to make sure the big matters, such as virtue of duty, of honesty, of righteousness, of benevolence, etc., that those virtues are also seen to. Because in the little details, people will read you by how you hold yourself. And if you let the appearance of yourself as a samurai slip, they will translate this to mean you have let other parts of your life slip as well. And there's some basis for this. A person who lets themselves fall into a state of disrepair as they gain weight, or if they stop cutting their hair, or if they stop trimming their nails, or they stop, making sure their clothes are clean and pressed. You can see they're giving up. They are letting themselves slip into this state of carelessness and a lack of attention. And you probably don't regard this person as any physical threat, because if they don't maintain themselves physically for themselves, how much of a threat physically could they be for you? Okay, last reading. second to last reading. This will be on page 20. And Tsunetomo said, "The person without previous resolution to inevitable death makes certain that his death will be in bad form. But if one is resolved to death beforehand, in what way can he be despicable? It is a wretched thing that the young men of today are so contriving and so proud of their material possessions. Men with contriving hearts are lacking in duty. Lacking in duty, they will have no self-respect." Okay, so he's following on that last passage about having a very well-maintained appearance and then making sure your armor is, make sure your armor is shine and well looked after and not showing any kind of deformity, that your sword is sharp and polished, that your greaves and your gauntlets and your helmet are on straight and in good-looking order. So too, he says that a person with previous resolution to inevitable death makes certain that his death will not be in bad form. If you go to death preparing yourself as though that death will occur today, that death will never be in bad form. And he mentions that the younger samurai, again, I'm talking about the Arlie Ermy Full Metal Jacket, like, kids back in my day, they didn't care about material possessions. They just cared about honor and a good appearance. You kids nowadays, with your material possessions and your contrivances, this shows you lack in duty, therefore you lack in self-respect. You could say this is kind of an old crotchety man's opinion on younger samurai, but he sees that this lack of care for personal appearance and these samurai showing a propensity to hoard or lust after material possessions shows they have a lack of duty to their lord and to their Bushido. And that means they have a lack of self-respect as well, because if they disregard their duty to their lord and show more loyalty to physical possessions and disregard their physical appearance as well, this shows a lack of self-respect. And as we know from the 8 virtues of Bushido, respect was chief among those virtues. All right, last reading. We go to page 24. Tsunetomo said, "In China, there was once a man who liked pictures of dragons, and his clothing and furnishings were all designed accordingly. His deep affection for dragons was brought to the attention of the dragon god, and one day a real dragon appeared before his window. It is said that he died of fright. He was probably a man who always spoke big words, but acted differently when facing the real thing." Okay, this is a good one. He uses the device of a story to illustrate a point of hubris and making big talk and showing pride, but when it came time for the metal to meet the meat, as they say, people show their true colors and don't follow through on all the previous words or boasting or claims that they made. And he uses the story of this fictional man in China who loved the image of dragons and thought that the mythology of dragons was fascinating and cool. So he fashioned his dress with dragon print, or maybe he kept art in his house of a dragon flying through the air, or a fire-breathing dragon in some portrait. And the dragon god heard of this man and wanted to see if he was, all about dragons for real. So he sent a dragon to the man's house. And the man saw this dragon out of his window and was so terrified of an actual dragon actually showing up that he died of fright. Well, we can say that this was probably a man who said one thing on certain days, but when the actual day came to follow through on that, he was all talk. And this is in keeping, again, with the drill sergeant, Arlie Ermy Full Metal Jacket. It's like, talk is cheap, but when the day comes and the dragon is outside your window, what kind of man will you be? Will you be the one who only wants to see dragons in pictures? Or will you be the man who actually sees a dragon outside and regards it just the same as he would the picture? You can trust these people if they demonstrate that they are the person who will make no distinction between the dragons they fashion for themselves as idols and a real dragon if it shows itself in the flesh. Of course, dragons don't exist, right? Probably not. Anyway, this will conclude part 1 of the Hagakure. Again, I said this is going to go pretty fast because most of these passages are relatively straightforward. Tsunetomo didn't have time to waste when it came to Bushido. He got down to the point and he said what he meant and he meant what he said. And samurai that were reading this didn't really have to parse through the language like maybe they had to do with Takuan Soho or Yagyu Munonori. It was cut and dry for most of these passages. But there are several, and many of them are very good to give you a good idea of what Bushido meant to Tsunetomo, and from his militaristic, no-nonsense Shinto form of Bushido during the 16 and 1700s. Okay, yeah. Appreciate you coming by and giving this one a watch. Yamamoto Tsunetomo, part 2, coming up next time. And we'll continue with further readings in Hagakure. But until that time, take care of yourself, and we'll see you then. Bye.